What if there were a way to automate your blood sugars with type 1 diabetes to get them so well controlled that you don't have to do anything, right? I mean, while there's no cure yet, there are ways that you can make your blood sugars cooperate behind the scenes so that you can step into more freedom and flexibility with life. See, one of my goals with my own type 1 diabetes is how can I spend as little effort and as little attention possible managing blood sugars so that I can do the fun stuff and actually feel like my life is fulfilling, right? And spend time with family and friends and pursue career and athletic dreams and all these things without blood sugars getting in the way. In today's episode, I do want to share with you a few tips that I've come across recently as life got a little bit chaotic for me and I was forced to take a more active role, not only in my diabetes, but also in other areas of life. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to share with you what ultimately was the one thing that allowed me to reset my blood sugars, get everything back on track, and now have a 100% time and range day where things are just smooth sailing again. If you don't know who I am, my name's Matt Van de Veit. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. I live with type 1 diabetes, and I'm a best-selling author on a book called The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, which we will break into today as well. So stick around. I'm pumped for this one, and we're going to get it with our theme song and then jump into today's crazy story. I hope you enjoy. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, life got a bit crazy recently in many areas, kind of all at once. It was like an avalanche in our life. A lot of stuff going on in our personal life, and it certainly has caused some unrest, but nothing we can't handle. And recently, because of that, I've been forced to take a much more active role in a lot of areas of our lives that we previously kind of had on autopilot, right? With the business, the finances, house stuff, projects, cleaning, diabetes is in there, right? A lot of stuff that previously I kind of had smoothed out, I had to jump back in, and all of a sudden my life was very full. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to share a bit about operator versus owner, how you can own your diabetes instead of your diabetes owning you. I think that's an important distinction that we're going to hold on to for later. But recently, with life getting more chaotic, a few things just kind of were set on fire, so to speak, and required that I spend a lot more time and effort managing and operating different aspects of life, right? And in doing so, of course, my own attention was split. And as somebody living with ADHD as well, my attention is already a difficult enough thing to manage, right? But with these tasks that I had to take on, I had to step into the role of operator, where I'm in the daily tasks, in the mud, so to speak. And in the world of business, there's this phrase, operator versus owner. And how a lot of business owners are not actually owners, they are business operators, where they are daily in there, answering emails, doing customer support, fulfillment, shipping inventory, all this stuff. Those aren't things that an owner does. An owner of a business does the high level stuff. They spend time thinking, discussing, doing strategic partnerships. It's more high level management style stuff. You think about a CEO, right? They're in their office behind their desk doing the important stuff. They're not the ones going in and putting shipping labels on boxes typically, right? An operator is the one that's going getting their hands dirty. So I recently had to go from owner of my life to operator of my life in many senses of the word, where even with my diabetes, things just didn't quite make sense anymore. I had to really spend more time analyzing my patterns, assessing why blood sugars were spiking at some times and plummeting at other times. This might sound familiar to you if you've ever had blood sugar roller coaster days, right? Where you're like, I don't even know what's going on, but it's been high and low and high and low. It just requires a lot more of your attention, right? Kind of feels like you're babysitting your blood sugars. With diabetes, with owner versus operator, a lot of us are stuck in that operator mode, right? Where you're in the thick of it every day, you're managing blood sugars in real time. There is very little planning, there's no strategy, there's no formulas, right? I talked in the beginning of this episode, The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, the book that I wrote, teaches you how to do this kind of stuff. So we're going to break into those lessons briefly. But if you want the full lessons, obviously just go grab the book on Amazon, The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. Now, with operating diabetes. It looks a lot like, how many carbs do I dose for? Oh, it didn't work. Am I high? How much insulin do I take? Oh, now I'm going low. I have to add some sugar, right? And it's just always on your mind, and it can be very exhausting. The goal then is to get to an owner position where you own your diabetes so it does not own you. Now, in owner position, yes, you still have to check in, right? The CEO is checking in with their business managers, but they're not in the thick of it every single day. So with your diabetes, yes, you're counting carbs. Yes, you're taking your insulin. Yes, you glance at your blood sugars periodically, but it's a lot more focusing on high-level strategy and those periodic check-ins than it is you constantly focusing on blood sugars and did they rebound? Are they spiking? Is it dropping? What do I do? Right? So it allows you to think more strategically about blood sugars and think about if I do this, then what happens next, instead of just focusing on the now. So it's more predictive blood glucose management, but also it frees up your mind for more enjoyment in real time. So if you're not focusing on blood sugars, you're free to then focus on life. Right? So your family, your friends, your events, your career, athletic pursuits, right? This is the only way that, the last couple of months I was able to do what I did, which is complete a full distance Ironman, become a best-selling author, still have a family life, and do all these things while blood sugars were managed above 90% time and range consistently. Right? That's the only way this works. If you step into an ownership role instead of an operator role. If I had to focus on my blood sugars that whole time, guarantee you half of those things would not have happened, because my mental space, my capacity mentally, nobody has that much room for cognitive function, right? Maybe like 2 people in the world. So we have to learn how to own certain areas of our life so that they don't require as much of our attention, so we can then move on to other areas of life that we want to give our attention. Does that make sense? So the big question then is, with blood sugar management, how do you go from operator to owner? Like, what is the step, right? So operator is more attention, more effort. That's what your blood sugars require of you if you want to have relative good control, right? So if I am constantly watching my numbers, doing what's necessary, I can keep it pretty well controlled. Now, the secret sauce in business is that you have to have systems, right? Systems and hiring the right people if you want to go from operator to owner. So in my own business, I have a full team. In fact, my team members are going to edit this video. They're going to upload the video. They're going to put fancy stuff on the screen, and in the audio portions, they're going to do all this amazing stuff so that I can focus my attention on other things that only I can do, right? So systems and people, that's the magic sauce to getting to an ownership position within a business. For blood sugars, going from operator to owner requires formulas, right? And this is why I wrote the book on formulas specifically. Like, that's the entire book, just so you guys know. It's how to set up blood sugar formulas so that you can have freedom. Hence the title, The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. That's the whole point. Get these blood sugar formulas or systems in place to take you out of the operator role, where you're always like hyper-focused or responding to blood sugars all the time, and get you into a place where you're an owner of your diabetes, so diabetes does not own you. That's freedom. Getting into a place where blood sugars are so well controlled and predictable so that you know, oh, they're going to be fine. I don't need to watch them all the time. I'll check in, sure, give insulin when I need to, but we're going to live our life. We're going to have some fun with this. That's the goal of becoming an owner of your diabetes. And in business, I hire consultant coaches to help me understand how to run and grow my business so that I can impact more people living with type 1 diabetes and really change the world with this new revolutionary method of blood sugar formulas. Because nobody talks about this, not even in doctors' offices. So I have this mission to get this message out there to as many people as possible. So I actually hire coaches to help me learn business stuff, because I don't know a lot about that. I know about blood sugars, and they teach me that. So one of the things that really caught me off guard initially, one of my coaches told me, was you need to hire the right people and get systems in place, right? So you can go be an owner, not an operator, so that you can have thinking time. And I was like, what? What do you sit there and just like ponder life. And they're like, no, this is how you strategize. You think through potential problems, solutions, different paths that your business might take. You think into the next year, where do you want the business to go? What's the best for your customers? How do you serve them at the highest level possible so that your clients are seeing massive transformational results and become raving fans? You got to think about that stuff. And if you got your head in the weeds, always trying to figure out how to respond to emails and figure out fulfillment, and you're putting the shipping labels on the packages and all this stuff, you never have time to think about high-level strategy. And with blood sugars, very similar thing, where if you're always bouncing back and forth, thinking, okay, more insulin, oh, no, shoot, more sugar, oh, now it's going high again, more insulin, you don't have time to step back and analyze the big picture, the patterns behind your blood glucose numbers, right? So if I look at my clarity report, for example, I'm wearing Dexcom. Right now I've got G6 on this arm and G7 on this arm. You can ask me why in the comments if it's of interest. We can talk about that in a different episode, why I'm wearing two. But what I want you to think about is, what are the big picture patterns with blood sugars, right? I spike every morning after breakfast. Okay, that's a really good data point to think about, right? Not just respond to, not just be an operator, but to think about, to be that CEO of your diabetes, the owner, where you're like, I spike every morning. I wonder why that happens. Identify the source, and what can I do about it to stop that from happening in the first place? Oh, it spikes because I'm running out the door and I don't pre-bolus. Got it. Okay, so how can I either pre-bolus more or change the macronutrients of breakfast so it's got more fats, fibers, and proteins to slow down digestion of the foods to avoid the spike? Or maybe I do intermittent fasting and I just don't eat breakfast at that point, and I can eat it when I get to work, when I'm able to sit down and do a proper pre-bolus, right? But that requires thinking. So you cannot get to that high level of strategic thinking with your blood sugars as an operator. You're too busy. You're caught up with responding to blood sugar problems in the moment, or more so, realistically, reacting, right? Oh no, it's high, take insulin. Oh no, it's dropping, take sugar. And you don't have mental space to do the high level thinking, analyzing patterns. Oh, it spikes after breakfast, but it always comes back down before I give a correction. So it's the proper amount of insulin. I just need to work on my timing of the insulin. Got it, right? Now, this is often why people come to me as well, is they just don't have the mental capacity. They're too busy with life. So they're like, hey, Matt, can you just analyze my blood sugar patterns for me? And I'm like, well, it's more about with you, right? Because I don't know your personal life and what led into that blood sugar. But yes, right. And that's where we can discuss if working together makes sense on a more personal level and come up with customized blood sugar formulas. But ultimately, getting formulas in place is what's going to allow you that space, because formulas, the entire goal of blood sugar formulas is to get blood sugars more predictable, more stable, so that you're able to take a step back and either analyze further and continue that growth pattern, or take a step back and just enjoy life more, and have more predictability in your life with blood glucose numbers. So, an example, I'll give you guys this. An example in real life, went over to my brother-in-law's house for a whole family family Christmas with my in-laws, and I wanted to have some toast with dinner. They're all Italian. It was pasta, meatballs, filet mignon, garlic bread, some other stuff. And I was like, I want to toast my bread. And so I went over, and it's just this blank screen. I was like, what is this? And he was like, oh, it's like a touch screen fancy toaster. Long story short, this thing was incredible. You select what type of bread, or even like what type of item. So it's like bagel, bread, waffle, whatever else you put in toasters. And you have the opportunity to select it and then select the color of the bread that you want as an outcome. So it's like, I want a number 4 darkness. I want it pretty toasted. I want some crunchiness in there. And then you walk away. And I thought, how interesting, because that is what it's like to be an owner, right? Yes, there's still input. It's this bread and I want it this dark, but then you get to leave. You don't have to sit there and continue toasting your bread. Alternatively, or comparatively, back in college, I was in a very different place than I am now financially. And I think most people in college were. My quote unquote toaster was a pan that we used for everything, like pancakes, scrambled eggs, and yes, also making toast. We didn't have a toaster. And you're like, Matt, a toaster is like $10. I know. At that point in my life, that's where I was at, all right? But toasting a piece of bread literally meant putting a pan over the stove and putting bread in the pan, and then you would watch it, wait for it to get hot enough, you'd flip it, it wouldn't really get crispy, right? And it probably got like iron flakes in it from the pan that we got off the swap meet. So that's more of an operator role where I had to be present because it was over an open fire, right? And before that, we used to toast things on the stovetop, like tortillas, no pan. You just put it over the open flame. You have to stay there, otherwise the bread gets lit on fire and it's a whole new problem. So as an operator, it requires a lot more intentional focus on that task. So you're unable to move on to other bigger, better things. Whereas with my brother-in-law's fancy toaster, I set it and I forget it, right? I walked away and I started prepping my other parts of dinner. I was in conversation and then I hear it pop in the background. I'm like, oh, my toast is done. That was easy, right? That is operator versus owner. It's a very different life when you're able to take a second to breathe and actually analyze what's going on with your blood sugars. Because without that, you're going to be in constant reaction mode, always at the beck and call of your blood sugars. And if at any point you get burnt out or decide, I'm just not going to respond right now, they go haywire. Your A1C creeps up and up and up. Your time in range goes to crap. And all of a sudden, all the hard work that you put into your blood sugars is gone. How challenging is that? So really, formulas are the way for you to not only get your life back, but also to finally gain true control over your blood sugar numbers and give you the mental space to understand them. How powerful is that? Prime example of this is example A, operator. You take insulin for a meal, you pre-bolus, you try and do your best to keep it under control, but by the end it spikes, you add more insulin, you stack insulin, it comes down crashing because it turns out you didn't need that. Now you have to have sugar and the blood sugar roller coaster begins, right? The rest of your day, you are forced to spend more time watching your blood sugars because if you don't, they're going to interrupt your day anyways with lows and highs and feeling trashy, right? At least this has been my experience, is that the less controlled my blood sugars are, the more attention they require just for me to survive a day, right? Alternatively, if I have formulas set in place, it really is as simple as a few inputs and then move on, right? Count my carbs, take my insulin, and then get back to my day. And that's exactly what happened this morning, right? Where I was able to reset my blood sugars. Believe it or not, the holidays are not nice for most people for blood sugars. Okay, family-wise, love it. Holidays are fantastic. But blood sugars tend to be a bit more challenging because we're eating different foods, oftentimes that don't have carb counts. Our routine is thrown off. A lot of us who do regularly exercise find it more difficult to find time to exercise because you might be traveling, right? So I had to hit the reset button. And I told you if you stuck around to the end, I'm going to give you my favorite reset button for blood glucose management. Now for me, the resets that I typically need are high blood sugar resets, where I've seen higher blood sugars than I would like, and I am forced to give it more attention in order to bring it back down so that it doesn't impact my A1C, my time in range, but also more importantly, my insides, right? My blood vessels, my organs, all that kind of stuff. So when I look at a higher pattern of blood sugars, I have two big options that are glaring me in the face. One, take more insulin, which I did, and two, improve insulin sensitivity, which I did. Now, technically there's a third option, but I consider it to be the same, but opposite of number two, which is to reduce insulin resistance, right? So if you were to increase insulin sensitivity, you are by default also reducing insulin resistance. Technically, they are two different things, but as a way to simplify it, let's pretend it exists on a scale. As you get more insulin sensitive, you are therefore less insulin resistant. As you become more insulin resistant, you are therefore less insulin sensitive. It's an inverse relationship, right? So those are my options. I can change the amount of insulin that my body requires, and I can change the amount of insulin that I give my body. So I did that. I actually ramped up my insulin. This is not medical advice. Yours is going to be very different. But for me, I actually ended up needing to run a 120% basal profile, which means it's 20% above my standard basal insulin on my insulin pump, and give an extra 1 to 2 units of insulin per meal, which for me is kind of a lot, right? Now, in addition to that, because after doing some high-level CEO/owner kind of thinking, right? It's not just you want to slap a Band-Aid on and go, okay, take more insulin, we're good, right? You want to understand what's really going on. So since I already have my blood sugar formulas set up, and I use one called the 80-20 blood sugar formula, the best. It's given me my life back with diabetes. But because I used that, I was able to take a step back and think about things and find the true culprit of what's going on. For me, it was a mixture of a little bit less exercise, a little bit messier diet, but big picture was I've gained some weight, right? Quite a bit, actually. I think I've gained like 13 pounds. Some of it's muscle, but it's not all muscle. And that's a mixture of holidays, yes, but more so, I completed my 4th Ironman event probably a month ago by the time this episode goes live. And since completing it, my workouts have certainly gotten easier, but my diet has stayed the same. So I'm eating as an Ironman athlete would, which is a lot of food, but I don't still work out as an Ironman athlete would, right? I switched up my training routine. So I've gained some weight, long story short. When you gain fat, that's one contributing factor that can increase insulin resistance. So I needed to reduce insulin resistance. So I made a slight adjustment to my diet and improve insulin sensitivity. Now, the most efficient way to improve insulin sensitivity, efficient meaning you can get it done today, workout. And most specifically for most people, best answer is weightlifting. And with Ironman training, I didn't do a whole lot of weightlifting because I was more focused on ultra endurance training, right? I needed to be out there doing 140.6 miles with swimming, biking, and running. So it was all endurance focused. So I went literally Christmas morning. We were actually an hour late because of me. I was like, hey, hon, sorry, I can't do this. I need to work out. We're going to work out and then we're going to go visit family for Christmas. Because all Christmas morning with my family, my daughter, she's 3, opening her presents. She's finally able to fully appreciate it and was like, oh my gosh, I got all this cool stuff. And we're like, oh, this is amazing, right? I got to enjoy that, but my blood sugars were high, like for 3 hours, the whole time. And so I told my wife, Lisa, I said, hey, I need to lift some weights. And we have a weight rack in the backyard. It's like, I need to lift some weights before we go. Otherwise, the whole day is going to be shot. All this insulin resistance is really catching up to me. I have taken loads of insulin and it's done virtually nothing. So did a workout, and for the rest of the day, blood sugars were like 80s and 90s, smooth sailing. I had a feast at my family's house. Went to my family's house on Christmas Day. And I think I had like 5 or 6 plates of food for lunch alone. And now you're like, oh, that's why he gained 13 pounds. Yes, I still eat a lot of food and I am no longer training for an Ironman, so it's catching up to me. But I was like, hey, it's Christmas. I'm going to enjoy this, right? As we all should. And so, I had like 5 or 6 plates of food, blood sugars, 100% time and range the rest of the day. So if you're ever in a bind, you need to improve insulin sensitivity, weight training, resistance training specifically, just incorporating muscle tissue is one of the best ways that you can improve your insulin sensitivity, because not only does it burn blood glucose, not as effectively as cardio might, but it still burns blood glucose. It'll get your metabolism firing again. But most importantly is it gives you lasting insulin sensitivity, because when you use your muscles get rid of stored glucose or glycogen. Hold on, don't leave. I know it's sciencey, just give me a second. When you release that glycogen, sorry, so many terms. When you release the glycogen, which is the stored glucose in your muscles, you need to replenish that. Your muscles go, hey, we need that glucose to come back so we can then flex our muscles and work out again tomorrow. And so for the next day, 2 days, in some extreme cases, 3 days, your muscles will be absorbing glucose from your bloodstream independently of insulin, which means you can take the same amount of insulin that you've been taking the last few days and get to eat more carbs because your muscles are taking in some of those carbs. So that is one of the reasons we see improved insulin sensitivity, that your muscles become sponges, essentially. They soak up the extra glucose in your bloodstream and help to keep you more stable, more in range. Hence why I had 6 plates of food on Christmas Day for one meal and stayed 80s, 90s, low 100s for the course of that meal. Absolutely amazing, and really set me back on track for success. So there's your pro tip for sticking around. I talk about that kind of stuff, and don't worry, it's It's very simplified in the book. I don't use the big science terms. We talk about like tug of war between insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance. Highly recommend you grab the book. So the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, you can go find it on Amazon right now. In fact, it might still be on sale. So I would check that out, the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. If you've already gotten it, because I know hundreds, if not thousands of you have already gotten it, which is why it's now a #1 bestseller as well. If you've already gotten it, do me a favor. I would really appreciate this. I know a lot of other people would as well. Leave a review. Let me know your honest thoughts, because your review might be the reason somebody decides to give it a try and could dramatically shift the outcomes of their life, of their control with diabetes. It might inspire them. It might be the reason that they live. So if you could do me that favor, just leave a quick review. It takes 2 minutes of your time. Just go back to the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula page on Amazon and leave a review there with your honest thoughts. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out. And remember, own your diabetes so that it does not own you. It's time to gain freedom with your type 1 diabetes. Hope you found this one useful. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and keep up the fight.